great. Alright, well, now I'm in a terrible mood. Let's do your performance review.
Welcome to the Managing Humans podcast. I'm your host, Chad Bates. This week, we're talking retail, customer service, and leadership with Chris Flett. Chris is the Director of Store Operations and Implementations at Starbucks. Chris has had an epic journey through American retail. He's worked for and been a leader at some of the most well-known names to ever grace a strip mall or retail center across this country. His experience and commitment to continuous improvement makes him a perfect guest for the podcast, and he even inspired a new question for the show. So check out next week's episode to hear what it is. As always, if you like the show, give it a like, subscribe, and comment on your podcast app, YouTube, or our Substack. Get some coffee, and let's get to my conversation with Chris. Chris Flett, welcome to the Managing Humans podcast.
Thanks, Chad. I'm very excited to be here. This is awesome.
I think you might be the first person who's actually listened to the show that is going to be a guest, so it's going to be extra good, I bet.
Yeah, you've had some great guests on. They're terrific leaders, and I've enjoyed the podcast so far.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I think I always end up talking about work with you, so this is a natural extension of that. But
that's right.
You're probably one of the people that I know that is as into learning and getting better at work as I am. So it's always, I'm always excited to talk to you about what you do, how you do it, and kind of what's coming up. And I'm happy to share that with other people because I always end up telling stories about my friend Chris at Starbucks, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's super interesting. I like to know, all the behind the scenes stuff." So that
Thanks,
we'll get into that a little bit. So tell us a little about what you're currently doing.
Yeah, so I work for Starbucks Coffee Company, based here in Seattle. Been with the company for a little over 11 years, and the majority of it working in our support center here in Seattle. I lead a team of 10 partners to support product and marketing operations. We work with our product development, product experience, global coffee, and marketing teams to bring new products to market, sustain them over time. In other words, we operationalize the go-to-market plan for our company. And it's an honor to work on this type of work because we're a food and beverage company, and we get to experience all the new innovations and help scale those up so that millions of customers can experience those beverages every day.
That's right. You help start America's Day.
That's right.
I know some other company uses that as part of their slogan, but I think it's actually Starbucks now.
Yeah, I think the majority of Americans, at least, start their day with a Starbucks run. We appreciate it very much.
Yeah. And being a native Seattleite, I've grown up with Starbucks, and just as part of my life. Like I didn't even know it was a place or a thing that other other cities didn't have until I started working in the South a lot, back in the 90s. And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to run to Starbucks," and we're like, "What is that?" And now you can't go anywhere without seeing a couple of them. So it definitely has integrated itself into the common vernacular and just everyone's daily schedule. And after my wife and I's vacation to Italy, it's even starting to show up there. So it's an
awesome.
Interesting change.
Yeah. Well, going to Italy and experiencing coffee and cafes is amazing, and the inspiration for Starbucks. So if you look at the Starbucks history, Howard Schultz started working for Starbucks when they sold beans and tea, and he was on a trip to Milan, Italy, and got to experience espresso in a cafe setting, and came back to Seattle and tried to convince the Starbucks leadership at the time to open cafes.
Hmm.
And so you see a lot of Italian inspiration, even with the names that we give our beverage
Right.
sizes. And
Right.
the majority of the beverages have some Italian inspiration. So to see it
Yeah.
firsthand in Italy is amazing.
Yeah. I never realized I wanted to stand at a bar and drink a very tiny cup of espresso as much as I do.
A good cup of espresso will get your day started right.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
can definitely distinguish the quality of the coffee in an espresso shot.
Yeah. Exactly. So let's go back a little bit and talk about your first job. What was the first thing you ever got paid to do that wasn't getting allowance from your parents?
My first job was at Winn-Dixie in Boca Raton, Florida. So I grew up in South Florida, and I got a job as soon as I turned 16 years old. I could ride my bike down to the Winn-Dixie near my house, and I got a job as a bagger there.
Mhm.
I did that for a few months, and then they promoted me to stocker. And so I joined the stocking crew, which is actually what I want to do when I applied for the job. But you got to earn your way into that role. And I did stocking for a while, and then they moved me over to the dairy frozen food department, and worked in that department for a while. Graduated high school, went to University of Florida, transferred to the Winn-Dixie, close to my apartment, and I ended up working for that company for 7 years, all
Wow.
through high school and college.
Yeah.
And it's where I fell in love with retail. And I actually wanted to be a retailer when I grew up. So when I graduated college, I went right into retail, and I've been in retail for 30 years.
I was going to say you have the most extensive retail experience that of anybody that I've met. So I love hearing the list of all of the different retail companies you've worked and managed for. So
Yeah.
what's the rundown?
Yeah. So when I graduated from college, I went to work for Walmart in their management and training program. I was interested in working in the Supercenter division or Sam's Club because of my grocery experience. Felt like I'd be most qualified to step into a retail role that way. And they hired me into the Supercenter division. So I moved from Gainesville down to Fort Myers, Florida, and started working in the Cape Coral Walmart Supercenter. And so I did a 6 month stint as a manager in training and got promoted to assistant manager. They put me on home lines, and then I moved around to soft lines and hard lines. So like, there's different departments within the store.
Mhm.
I did overnight logistics. That was probably the toughest job, and where I really learned hard work, speed, efficiency. I loved working for Walmart. I did for 2.5, 3 years. I consider that my graduate school for retailing.
Right.
My first real leadership job. I was working for the largest company in the world at the time, largest retailer indeed, and
Mhm.
they had just lost Mr. Sam a few years earlier, but a lot of the associates in the Walmart stores remembered him very fondly and had been working for the company for 20 plus years. Here I
Mhm.
was, 23 years old, managing department managers that had been with the company a very long time, and I just learned right away to respect their leadership, their responsibility, and understand the culture of the company. And they taught me about leadership.
Mhm.
And that company taught me about hard work, living
I
a
bet.
retailer's life. I can tell you there are days where I was scheduled 12 hours. I come in at 6 p.m. I was supposed to get off at 6 a.m. And freight didn't have to be off the floor till 10 a.m. And I wanted to make sure that we got the floors cleared and the store was ready. So I probably worked till 10 a.m. most days. So it's 15-hour days. But I really appreciated that time, and I respect hard work. Um, and the people that work for Walmart were incredibly hardworking.
Mhm.
After a few years with Walmart, I got recruited by Gateway, the computer company. They were Gateway 2000 at the time. This was 1998. So a couple of years before Y2K. I started with them as a sales manager. It's a funny story. Joining that company, I was responsible for hard lines at Walmart at the time. So I had the electronics department, and I got a phone call from somebody that they called me over. There's a customer on the line for the manager over electronics, and so I picked up the phone. It happened to be a recruiter. I never got a recruiter call before, and they told me they were from Gateway, and I didn't know who Gateway was. And I talked with them a bit, and I wasn't interested in going anywhere. I was flattered that they caught me on the phone, and I hung up. I went to the back room a little while later, and I was telling one of the other assistant managers that I got this recruiter call, and it was from Gateway, and he was super excited. Like, did you talk to them? Like, what are you going to do next? Like, I said, no, I wasn't interested. I don't really know who they are. He goes, oh, that's a really good company. If they call you back, will you get their number and tell them to talk to me? I'm like, okay. So they called back the next day, and I had a little bit more interest because I had gone home and researched Gateway that day, and I went on the interview and I got hired as sales manager. And so I was with them for about a year, and I got promoted to general manager in Gainesville, Florida, where I went to school. So that was kind of cool. I was married and moved to Gainesville, bought a home there. It was perfect for us, being an alum of the school. When I got promoted to general manager, they asked me, do you know anybody that would be a good backfill for you? Of course, I had my team of sales reps that were interested in the role, but I also had a friend that worked at Walmart that was interested in this job as well. And so I gave them his name, and they started recruiting him. He became a general manager for Gateway as well. So we both ended up working for the company, which is a neat story. After I left Gateway, went to work for Blockbuster Video. I was district manager and regional director for Blockbuster. I was the DM in the Orlando market for about 3 years. And then they had a turnaround situation that wanted me to move to Charlotte, North Carolina. And so I moved to Charlotte, took over a district there. They were multi-brand stores. So we had Blockbuster Video and a Game Rush. And so we got to get into the game trading business, which is kind of neat, very similar to like a GameStop inside of a Blockbuster store. And so I was all over North Carolina, leading those stores, did it for 11 months, and had a turnaround success story. I was able to achieve the number 2 ranking on our DM scorecard in those 11 months. And that got me some attention. So I interviewed for a regional director role, and they hired me to take over the Midwest region, which was Chicagoland plus Minnesota and Wisconsin. I did that for a couple of years, and then the company fell in hard times, struggling to stay afloat. And unfortunately, I lost my position there in a reduction in force. Everybody did at some point. And so I was looking for a job for the first time since college, and I didn't have a job. And it was really important for me to make that my job. And so I looked at a few brands that I was most interested in, like, where do I go for breakfast? Where do I go for lunch? What are some of the other retailers that I would be interested in? So the companies that rise to the surface there were Starbucks, Potbelly Sandwich Works, which is a Midwest brand, and then they are here in Seattle too. They've expanded quite a bit since the early days. And then Target, because I had worked for Walmart, Target was appealing. And so I was able to talk to both Potbelly Sandwich Works and Target, but Starbucks was going through a tough time in 2008 also, and I couldn't get a call back from them. So I went down the path of either Potbelly Sandwich Works or Target. I got interest from both of them. Potbelly Sandwich Works hired me in into a role in Chicago. I worked for them for a couple of years. Then they promoted me to the market manager role for New York, New Jersey. We were expanding outside of the Midwest. We had some stores in the Mid-Atlantic, Washington, D.C. area and in the Dallas area, but we had not gone to the Northeast yet. And so I was tasked with opening up the New York, New Jersey market from scratch. Arrived in Manhattan with 2 GMs, an assistant manager, a shift supervisor, and over the next 20 months, we opened 18 stores in Manhattan, a couple in New Jersey, and that was super exciting. I loved working for Potbelly Sandwich Works. I wanted to break into the fast casual restaurant business, and when I was weighing Target versus Potbelly, getting some fast casual experience was what tipped the scales. And I had also learned that there were a lot of former Starbucks partners. Howard Schultz was a board member for Potbelly Sandwich Works at one time. So, I experienced that for a few years. Great company culture. And then 11 years ago, I got a recruiter call. He called me 3 or 4 times before he told me it was for Starbucks. And I said,
interesting.
If you had just told me Starbucks on call number 1, you would have had me.
Yeah.
So, fast forward from 2008, now it's 2012, 2013, and Starbucks is interested in me. And it took about 6 months, but I landed my dream job and got to be a regional director for Starbucks Coffee Company in New York City. And I ran about 90 stores in Midtown Manhattan for 3 years. Loved every minute of it. And then got an opportunity to come out to the support center and support our enterprise. And I've been doing that ever since.
Nice. So you have deep and intimate knowledge of making coffee for lots of people.
I do. Yes. We want to be consistent across our 10,000 stores in North America. So it takes a lot of work on our end to make sure that our baristas are set up for success every day.
Yeah. And it sounds like a daunting challenge just to start off with the amount of items on the menu and all the things that happen in a Starbucks cafe. I can only imagine it's even more difficult than it sounds like.
I credit the baristas. They are resilient. They're hardworking, smart, care very much about the company and its culture. And it shows up in the way that they treat our customers. I was a super fan of Starbucks as a customer, and the experience that I get, and baristas remembering my name and remembering my drink, and making me feel special, even though there were hundreds of customers coming in to those stores every day. That's the part that is the Starbucks experience that we strive for. Mm-hmm. And it's incumbent upon our team to make sure that beverage making is consistent and high quality, and there are cues that help them memorize what they're doing. And as they become more proficient, like they memorize the recipes, they make them more often. It's really like playing music. If you know how to play guitar, you got to work on the chords for a few years, but once you have it down, you don't even think about strumming the strings anymore. Your fingers just do the work. And I think that's how beverage making is, or bartending. Our baristas are very much like mixologists in a restaurant. The number of drinks that they have to remember, and they get it right.
Yeah, it's amazing when I have a very simple order most of the time, and whenever I hear somebody with a really complicated order, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a disaster. And it's amazing, and I think the technology has helped quite a bit, but the skill of a barista, especially at 5 a.m. when you're heading toward the airplane or something, and they're able to do it so well. It's magic.
Crafting beverages is a skill, and we have baristas that are excellent at their craft. we employ hundreds of thousands of baristas across the U.S. and we've tried to make sure that they have all the information they need to be successful is really important. But our store managers do a great job of hiring people into those roles who have the desire to help customers. A lot of people come on working for Starbucks because they're out of school for the first time, or they want benefits. So there's a lot of people that are interested in working for a company, and then they see that magic happen behind the bar. They get intimidated by it. I was intimidated by it when I joined the company 11 years ago. I worked in a store for 8 weeks, and I was behind the bar every day. And the first day I got behind that bar, and I knew I was going to pull an espresso shot, and I need to remember how many pumps of syrup go in, how much milk, etc. Like this, there's a lot behind this, and it's amazing that we can get it right so often.
Yeah. Well, that leads to a sort of question or comment, I guess, from me is I hired a lot of Starbucks former employees over the years, and I never had to worry about their customer service abilities. I could tell that there was something about the training and the way that they were hired and the expectations that they were given, that it's like if they had worked more than 6 months at a Starbucks, they were going to be good at customer service.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is that, from your perspective, having been there 11 years, especially, being in cafes all the time, like what is it about Starbucks that kind of ingrains that into former employees or current employees?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And so when I was with Blockbuster, I'd go into Starbucks stores and how do we hire employees like the Starbucks employees do? And we tried to recruit them, and it was really tough to do that. I think working for Blockbuster, talking about movies and games was a lot of fun, but it's not for everybody. And making beverages or being a barista is a lot of fun. It's not for everybody. We do recruit people that are very interested in working in food and beverage. It is a hospitality industry, so they're coming to us, understanding some of the expectations of working in hospitality. And I would say that our store managers do a very good job of understanding the company's mission and values and company culture. And they're looking for partners that sync with that culture. Right? We're performance driven, but we have a lens of humanity. And I think that the way that we treat our partners when they come on board, they work hard. There's no doubt about it. And part of my job is to continuously improve the partner experience. But they come on board and they have a lot of fun while they're doing it, and they experience the culture firsthand, and it's real. I've worked for a lot of companies. There's nothing like Starbucks. I had a regional vice president tell me early on in my Starbucks career, if you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, meaning this culture, once you get on board and you're immersed, it changes. He's like, you'll wait forever. There's no other shoe to drop. This is real, believe it or not. I'm like, well, I'm really happy to be here.
That's good. So to back up a little bit, I wanted to ask about the Walmart management training program, because I think you're probably the first person I've talked to that's actually been in a actual management training program like that.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of walk me through that a little bit. What did what were they looking for? What did you learn? What do you think you came out of that program with?
Yeah, Walmart did a really good job of management training. If I go back and think about all the companies that I've worked for, the best management training experience that I had was at Walmart. Because you can imagine, it's a very large retail company with very established standards and procedures. And organizational development.
Mhm.
And they also had all the resources that you need to be successful. And so it was very clear from my district manager at the time that you're going to get 6 months in an MIT role. We're not going to cut that down because we need you in the ASM role. He was very committed to all of us that were coming through that we were going to commit our time to training, which I appreciated. This is very easy, and I've seen it in other retailers where you try to zoom through the training so that you get keys to the store because they need you.
Right.
But they were committed to the 6 months, and a lot of that training was in store. Obviously, there was a curriculum that we followed. I had another assistant manager that was responsible for my training, and so I did a lot of shadowing of that person over that time. But they also took us out of the store, and so we have the distribution centers around Florida at the time, and they would have classroom training for us. Food safety, this was the first time I was a certified food safety manager, so I got the little cards when the food inspector showed up. I was the one responsible for making sure the grocery side of the business, our meat department, seafood department. When I was the assistant manager in charge of the store, I had to ensure food safety across this 250,000 square foot store.
Yeah.
So I took all that really seriously. I think one of the things that has differentiated me in my career is learning and being very open to learning and never saying to myself, I got it. I want to continually push myself to learn more. I've been in a leadership role for 30 years, but I don't feel like I'm the perfect leader yet. And I won't ever be, but I'm going to work my tail off to learn as much about leadership throughout my career. So every day I'm getting better.
Yeah. Well, our employees keep changing, so we have to keep changing as managers so we can, manage them effectively.
You're telling me. I think one of the things that Starbucks does a very good job of is teaching us about how generations of partners change and what's important to Gen Z versus Gen X, which you and I fall into. Right.
Yeah, it does seem like that. It goes from something you hear about in like some kind of stand-up comedy routine to like when you're actually at work, you're like, oh wow, yeah, millennials really are different. Whatever's after millennials, I gotta get used to that too. And
that's right. I
how
think
do I
they're
talk
alphas
to them
now, right? Gen Z's moved on to alpha, like the youngest.
I think
generation.
alphas is like the really young kids, like 7-8 years old now.
Yeah. Well, we'll be leading alphas soon.
Yeah. Well, I guess especially when you're in retail, kind of like our wives being in education, it's like you get this like weird backflow of information from teachers where they're like, the kids are into this, or have you heard this song, or all these things, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's so it's like this weird way of like learning about what kids today are up to.
That's right.
that we're not used to.
That's right. One of the cool things about retail is that you do get to work with people from multiple generations, right? So we have partners that are at the very beginning of their career, or they could be 16 years old, right? This is their very first job. And if we take care of them and they have a great experience at 16, they'll fall in love with retail too. They'll work for us for several years and maybe even make it a career. And then you have partners at the other end of their career where they may have had their first or second career already and they're looking for a part-time job. And then we've got everybody in between. So as a leader, we emphasize situational leadership and treating everybody as a person, and they have their own unique things that we need to consider in how we lead them.
Right. That's good. So go back to one of the questions I always like to ask is, you know, especially in your position when you're overseeing other managers or just when you're out in the world and you run into a customer service situation, like what do you want managers to do better?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think in customer experience situations where I've observed it going wrong,
Mm-hmm.
the manager is not demonstrating empathy.
Mm-hmm.
They are not recognizing what is upsetting the customer, right? And oftentimes they're defending the company.
Mm-hmm.
I've come from a background where the customer is always right. I was on the sales floor at a Walmart store, and I got called up to the customer service desk, and there was a customer that was returning a coffee maker that was really old.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I can't believe this person is trying to return this coffee maker. And I didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the person was getting one over. And so there was a co-manager there, and like, this customer's not letting me off. And I don't think we should take it back. And, he meets me about like halfway to the customer service desk. So we have this little, conversation in the middle aisle. And he goes, see that sign up there? What does it say? I said, 100% satisfaction guaranteed. And I'm like, oh man. Okay. So we took that coffee maker back, and the customer was really happy at the end of the day. And I just think when I've seen it go wrong, um, the manager is forgetting how important that business is long term, right? Because that customer is going to come back again and again and again. And when we give them the benefit of the doubt and we're empathetic in the situation and meet their needs, then they're going to reward us with their business. And so I think every customer service interaction is a long-term investment in the customer, and you got to treat it that way.
Right. So I've talked about experiences like that because I was in retail. I worked for CompUSA, which, doesn't exist anymore. And
We hired all of your
while.
people at Gateway.
Oh, yeah. That's true. But we would have situations where the policy would say 7 days with a receipt or no returns. And then the employee would say, I'm sorry, policy says 7 days, no receipt, no returns. And then they would call corporate and they get mad, and the corporate would say, like, oh yeah, we'll take it back.
Mm-hmm.
And they would come back like they were, like they won something. Like, aha, I got one over on you.
Yeah.
And my thought is always with that employee who now feels like they're not supported. And, I was doing the job right, but now somebody in Dallas, because that's where the headquarters was, has now, undercut me, pulled the rug out from under me, and I look like an idiot. And I always think, like, when I'm, if I'm a manager, I want to like take care of both of the people in that relationship.
Yeah.
Like, how do we support our employees but still be empathetic to the customer?
Yeah. That situation you described where the customer service line gives the customer what they wanted and the store didn't. That happens at Starbucks too. We have a customer experience line, and they are tasked with winning that customer's business back. And I would emphasize with our store managers, and it is weaved into our company's culture. We have a barista promise, and we also want to make the moment right. And so when you go and look at the way that we have made statements around customer experience, we do very much want to solve that customer's problem in the store. And so there's an emphasis for the store managers to do that. The barista may not feel empowered to do everything in their power to make the moment right. We want them to make the moment right, but there are oftentimes a shift supervisor or a store manager will get involved and do the right thing. But I can also tell you, just no matter what company I work for and been in a leadership role, those customer experiences, they escalate. When I was store manager or general manager, I get called into the service department at Gateway, and somebody wanted to return their computer, and I had to make a decision in that moment. Or as a district manager, I get calls on my stores about the cleanliness of my bathrooms, or as a regional director, I got a story about cleaning bathrooms. I would get escalated calls as a regional director, and each time it escalates, it gets more serious, and the customer is like digging in their heels, and I've just always made it a priority to win them back on that call, no matter what level of company I'm in.
Right. That's great. So this takes great hiring. So let's ask tell me about a time you made a great hire. Like, how did it feel when you interviewed the person? What's the questions that you're asking to figure out if this person's going to be a fit for the role and for the company? And tell me about that. How you knew that they were successful after they got started.
Yeah. I've had the good fortune of hiring a lot of people during my career, and it's one of the things that inspires me to stay in leadership role. I think at my core, what I enjoy doing more than anything else is leading people. And in a hiring manager capacity, you get to help people start a career or advance their career. And it is rewarding as a hiring manager to see them come on board and grow with a company. And so one of the best experiences I've had was as a regional director with Starbucks, and hiring a district manager from the fitness industry. She had worked for another company in fitness for 20 years, managing gyms, and wanted to come work for Starbucks. She was a fan of Starbucks, and how was she going to translate that fitness industry experience into food and beverage, which she had never done before? And so recognizing, of course, that my questions are going to be centered on leadership, because that's what I was hiring. I was hiring a leader of my stores, and she had demonstrated significant level of leadership in the fitness industry. And, we will hire multi-unit leaders or general managers, store managers from different industries based on their leadership experience. And I would say with this particular partner, they did not disappoint. Came on board, won over their peers very quickly. Many of her peers were partners that had grown up with the company and been promoted from assistant manager, store manager, district manager. And she won them over really quickly. In the time that she's been with Starbucks, almost, I would say, coming up on 10 years now, she has been in other roles, promoted into regional operations coach. She's been in a regional director role, and she is on the support center team now. And I couldn't be more proud of her. What I would say that, when hiring, looking for leadership competencies, and I'm also most interested in the questions that they ask. I know you've asked this question on other podcasts. What's that one question that you would ask in an interview that really made a difference? And to me, it's a question that everybody should be asking. And it's like, what questions do you have for me? But I am super interested, and almost makes the interview what they ask me, because I want to know that they've researched the company, that they've researched the job description. And not all job descriptions are great. Some are very detailed, some are not so detailed, and it leaves a lot of ambiguity. And so I want to know that they're genuinely interested in this job, and they've done their homework in advance, and they have thoughtful questions. Most of my interviews, at Starbucks, we have an interview guide. So we are consistent with what questions we ask, candidate, internal, external. We don't stray from it. So the competitive advantage that candidates can have is in that last part of the interview, and I give a sufficient amount of time to like really have a conversation with them when they ask those questions, and I'll answer. And then the candidate can often take their experience and weave it into my answer, like relate the two and reinforce their experiences based on how I answer the question. So to me, as a candidate, and to me as a hiring manager, most important part of the interview.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's like it shows you who they really are, how interested in the job they are. You know, if I've had interview subjects all the time that are like, nope, I think I got it. It's like,
you just missed a huge opportunity. Like, I am so disappointed when I don't get good questions, and it affects how I assess the candidate. They could have great experience on their resume. I want to have a good conversation with you, and I would say that interviews are more important now than ever. Right?
Yeah, I can concur. Being in the middle of a job search right now.
And it's a skill, and you have to practice that skill. There are techniques, and if you're an internal candidate going up against a competitive slate of candidates, I hope you're doing your homework in advance, and learning everything you can, and really making that moment. You get 45 minutes, an hour sometimes to make an impression on the hiring manager. You got to nail it.
Yeah. I'm shocked at how many times I've had internal candidates that just assumed it was a formality to do the interview, and then don't get the job, and then are like shocked. It's like you got wiped away by external candidates who actually were ready and had a strong history and asked good questions and were engaged the whole time, but you like barely showed up on time.
Yeah, there are no formalities. I would tell you for Starbucks, every job that is open is a competitive posting, and they'll have internal candidates. Not all are posted externally, but when we get external candidates also, you get hundreds of applications, and it's a really competitive slate. You can't take anything for granted. If you know the hiring manager, great. You still have to perform at your very best. In fact, I have interviewed candidates who worked on my team, and I tell them in advance, don't pretend you know me. Answer the questions as if we had met for the very first time today. And I know what you're capable of. I probably know all the stories you're going to share with me, but I want to know that you prep for this interview and you are competing against other top candidates. So you got to do your best. And I know they feel the pressure of that, and they should feel the pressure of that. But then, if we can do anything to help build their self-esteem and build their confidence through that conversation, I will certainly do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's competitive out there, and the interviews will make or break you.
Yeah. Yeah, they have a advantage being internal. They don't need an additional push up the scale without doing the work.
They do. I mean, in terms of the competitive advantage being an internal candidate is, and the job, or you may have an opportunity to investigate what the work is. We have to be careful about pre-interviews and things like that, because it's really important to be consistent and unbiased in the interview process. And so we have rules around that. The internal candidates, they understand company culture really well, and that's really important in hiring decisions as well. But external candidates, they bring something too, and I post my roles internal and externally. We gain experience from other companies. I've been the external hire several times, and I've had the opportunity to demonstrate my experience and how it would help build the skill set of the company I want to join. And so I make that a emphasis during the interview process. Like, these are the skills that I can bring to this job. And I've demonstrated them through multiple retailers. So I would say, yeah, both have their advantages, right?
Yeah. Well, that's on the first episode, Ben and I talked about that, like being co-managers, and he had come up internally and I came in externally, and like the combination is magic. Like
That's
it was
right.
awesome because you
Yeah.
have both the best of both worlds. But if you have, I mean, every situation's different, and every company's got to weigh the balance. But
Yeah. That internal experience is really important, and we want to create a career path for our partners. They need to see their peers get promoted, and to know that the effort is worth it. If you're ambitious and you don't see people around you get promoted, you start to look elsewhere. Like, this is not going to happen for me. I'm working my tail off, demonstrating what you tell me I need to demonstrate, but I don't see anybody getting promoted. I need to figure out where else they'll value me, right? So an internal career path is incredibly important, but balancing that with experience from outside the company is really important too. So I think any company that is trying to build a well-rounded organization with people with varied backgrounds and experiences, you got to look both ways.
right. So on the opposite side of the coin, tell me about a time you had to help an employee move to a new opportunity.
Mm. Performance management comes with the job, and you owe it to your team, you owe it to the employee, and you owe it to yourself to manage performance effectively, right? I want to help people realize their full potential. That is my purpose. And there are times where it's not a good fit. Partner or an employee or an associate may be very hardworking and genuinely want to do a good job, but they're struggling in their role. And so, I've helped employees identify whether or not they were the right fit for the job or the right fit for the company. Sometimes it's a different job within the same company, and trying to help them get into the role that will most effectively utilize their skill set, and they can grow, or they have a little bit more runway to improve their performance. Or there have been others where I need to hold a manager accountable, and I have worked shoulder to shoulder with them, coaching them on being effective in role and not seeing the improvement. Ultimately they go on a performance improvement plan. Performance improvement plans can be helpful and have been helpful. I've had managers successfully complete a performance improvement plan and maintain their performance level, stay with the company. It's not a foregone conclusion once you go on a performance improvement plan that you're going to leave the company. I think some people do assume that, and they actually start looking outside the company before that plan is done. But when you're on a plan, your boss is going to be micromanaging you, right? I mean, I would set up weekly meetings with the leader to go over their plan. We'll talk about what they need to do differently, recognize the progress that they're making or lack thereof. And when you're getting that level of direct leadership from your boss, you're either going to make improvement and sustain that improvement, or you're going to make improvement because you're doing exactly what you've been told to do. And then once that direct coaching goes away, you're on your own again. And I think that's where I've seen the performance improvement plan not be successful, where I was coaching so much in like direct tell mode to help this person succeed. When like I pulled back, like okay, now you're on your own. Like we've done everything that we've set out to do in this plan. I've got to hold you accountable for being successful. I can't sustain this level of management for you because I've got, 11 other DMs.
You could just do the job for him.
You're absolutely right. Like I can't do this. I can't be the DM and the RD at the same time. And so there have been examples where we had to separate a manager because they weren't sustaining their performance over the long term. And I take no joy in that. I do think that when those situations happen, you're going to help the person as much as you can, and then they will have to help themselves. And sometimes they realize like this isn't the right fit. I'm going to go be successful somewhere else, and they are successful, right? I follow people through LinkedIn and other places, and I'm super impressed with where they've taken themselves, and hopefully they took that experience and learned from it, and it made them a better leader in the long term. So.
Yeah, I do weird like ex-employee stalking on LinkedIn to like, see the people that I've let go or laid off or used to work with. And it's like, I get so much joy out of seeing them be successful elsewhere. Seeing like them get a promotion or something. And it's like, they're in a completely different industry doing a completely different thing. And it was like, yep, that's what you should be doing. Not what you were doing. And they were miserable doing.
Most people will find their thing and they're going to be really good at it. And I want to help them find their thing and be really good at it. Like helping somebody realize their full potential. It could be with us at our company, or they're going to reach their full potential at their next company. And that potential is always increasing, by the way. As you get better at your job, your capacity, your potential continues to rise. And so, as a coach, we want to help them continue to grow and develop and do more than they think they think they could possibly do in their career.
Yeah. One of the former managers I had when I was at Amazon was like, nobody wants to be bad at their job.
Nope.
And I was like, oh man, that's so like that rings in my head. And every time I've had an employee who's struggled or something, it's like, you can't be happy coming to work being miserable and keep talking to me about how you're not doing your job right. Like,
that's right.
How can we get you to a place where you are happy? It's either do the job better here, do a different job, go somewhere else. Yeah, let's make everybody's day better. Like
that's right.
Let's not make you miserable.
Yeah. And nobody wants to come to work and be unhappy all the time. Most people have to work. Yeah. And we have to pay the bills, and you're going to keep doing that job until you find another job because you got to keep paying your bills during the interim. But keep making your best effort to be successful in the job that you have today. The best way to get the next job is be great at the job you have now. And if you're struggling in the job that you have now, leaders will reward effort, right? If you're putting in an effort, the leader will be more patient. It's there will be occasions where somebody's like, I've given up. I'm just going to keep coming until you tell me not to. And you don't want to be in that situation either.
No. So that leads me to, what's something you learned from the best manager you ever worked for?
I've worked for a lot of great managers, Chad. So that's a hard question to answer and point to one thing. I'll share a story about my district manager at Gateway. I was working on a performance management situation for the first time as a GM. And it was an assistant manager that was struggling in their role. And this was the first time that I had to performance management because I hadn't had I had coached department managers, and I had coached sales associates at other companies, but this was a leader of people and really important part of my leadership team. So my DM taught me something called conscious competency. And I have used that coaching ever since. I will tell you that every new manager on my team today has heard about conscious competency. And it's really a cool framework for situational leadership where when a person starts in a new job or in a new role where they're learning a skill that they haven't experienced before, they are unconsciously incompetent at their job.
Mhm.
They've just been hired into a job or they've just been promoted into a role and they haven't experienced it yet. So they can't be competent in it, but they don't know that yet, right? It's a, first time store manager and they see their store manager and what is successful there, but they've never done that job before. So you quickly learn the expectations of the role and then you become consciously incompetent, right? You learn that you don't know
Yep.
everything. I've got so much to learn. Like it's this epiphany that happens like, oh my goodness, I don't know everything I need to know to be successful in this job.
Mhm.
And then your leader is responsible for coaching you throughout that because your leader knows that you're incompetent. And I use incompetent loosely, right? I don't want to say that they're incompetent people. They're incompetent because they are not at 100% yet. They're learning.
Right.
Everybody
Yeah.
learns in role. And so you learn once you go from consciously incompetent and you get coaching and your boss is raising your self-esteem, building your confidence, you become consciously competent in role, right? And
Mhm.
so that requires less from the leader in coaching. And like this person is doing a really good job. They're competent in their role, but you have to continue to reinforce them and build their self-esteem. And then eventually they become unconsciously competent, where they don't need the constant reinforcement. They're good at their job. They know that they're good at their job. So I learned that that's a long story to share the context for this. So I had an assistant manager that was not doing well, and what I realized is they were consciously incompetent, and I needed to change my leadership style in order to help my assistant manager be successful in role. And so
Right.
I went to more coaching, more self-esteem building. I wanted to build their capability. I wanted to build their confidence. And I think those two things are the center of coaching. So coaching builds capability and confidence, and confidence rather.
Mhm.
And so she taught me in that moment using that model, the beginning of situational leadership. And so I changed my approach, and that assistant manager also started to improve their performance. And I've talked about conscious competency, like I said, to every new manager because I want them to know that they are not going to be 100% hitting the ground running on day one in this job that they've never done before.
Right.
It's going to take some time, and I'm going to be your coach. I'm going to help you along
Yeah.
the way, and you're going to do great. And then I see them go all the way through that model, and they come out on the other end very successul.
That's
So
right.
that was a key leadership lesson I learned early in my career that applies today.
Yeah. Well, and it's good to have that model so that you can explain it to somebody else and just like keeps it resonant in your mind. But then it makes it easy for you to you get somebody new and say, you're going to go through this process. Don't freak out when you get to, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, and you don't feel like you know everything. Nobody expects you to.
That's right.
And it's like,
That's
keep
absolutely
learning.
right. At Starbucks, we it's similar model. We call it learning onion advising. So when you're in a new role, you're in learner mode, and then the leader will coach you as a learner, and then you start owning your job. That's really the conscious, competent person, and then they become unconsciously competent, and they're moving into an advisor role. Whereas if you're an advisor at Starbucks, it's not an official title. It's like, this is how we are, measuring performance. But if you're advising in role, and I have partners on my team that are advising in role, they're highly skilled and competent at their jobs. They're the ones that are bringing their peers along. They're the peer coach. And they're also the high potentials that are going to go on to the next level. And then they're going to be unconsciously incompetent again.
Right.
We all go through it. I've been through that cycle like 5,000 times in my career. I can pinpoint what stage I'm at because I'm always thinking in that way.
Yeah. Well, and it's especially from your perspective, and there's a similar structure in training that I used to use, because it was basically like you'd start out and you didn't know anything, and you were fine with that because you didn't know you even need to know. And then you learn something, and it's like you have to have detailed notes and be able to do step by step. And then you get to a place where you can do it really quickly and really easily. And then it gets to a point where it's like you're doing it so naturally that you forget what the actual process is. And if somebody asks you, you can't tell them.
That's right. That's right.
It's like
because
it's like giving directions to your own house. Like, you go up the thing, and then I think you turn by the barn.
That's right. When you drive home from work, you're on autopilot. Hopefully, you're paying attention on the way home. No, but earlier we talked about baristas and how it's like playing music. Well, it's the same analogy, right?
Oh, yeah.
A barista on day one doesn't know how many pumps of syrup go in a latte. Right. They don't know how many shots to pull into that latte. We're going to teach them. They're learners. They're unconsciously incompetent at their job, right? But they're gonna learn, and they're gonna continue to practice, and they're gonna get good at their job. And then we're gonna put them on bar during peak because they're excellent at it, and they are now unconsciously competent at their job. They can make drinks without thinking about it. Their hands just do it. I mean, I am amazed because I still have to think about the number of pumps and the number of shots. I'm not on bar every day, and I lead beverage operations. But I have to consciously think about it. And you go into a store, and store manager, assistant manager, barista, they're just moving. They're not thinking at all about it. And I think about in the construct of my team and the work that they do, and I can see those partners going through the whole thing too. And some of them are just playing sweet music. They're so good at their jobs.
Yeah. But it goes to like it's hard. I could imagine it would be really hard for like Keith Richards to teach somebody how to play guitar.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So it's like you gotta keep that in mind when you're the manager or you're the trainer or something. It's like, do I know this so well that I can't even turn around and explain it to somebody because it's just it's ingrained into my mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Keith Richards.
So,
well, we'll see if we can get him to teach us guitar.
Yeah. So I have a controversial question, which is, what's something that you learned from the worst manager you ever had? And I've had to change that because some people don't say that. They say they've never had the worst manager. So you can take this as any flavor you want. Like, what's something you learned not to do? What's something that you learned that was, a struggle for other managers? Did you have a worse manager you want to put on blast?
I'm thinking through the leaders I've reported to, and the example that I'll give you is actually a lesson I really appreciated. It wasn't from a poor example. This was actually good coaching from a leader I didn't care for.
Okay.
For different reasons, and I was a little taken back by how good the coaching was and how much it meant for me. Yeah. So I was this is about mid-career, and I was super ambitious, and my leader was super ambitious too. And I felt like they were putting themselves and individual goals before team goals. My team hears me say all the time, team goals are more important than individual goals. Like, I'm all about the team.
Yeah.
So I didn't see eye to eye with this leader. I also felt very confident in myself at that time in my career also, and could accomplish anything that the company asked me to do. Full of confidence. This leader advised me to demonstrate vulnerability. And I had never heard those words out of a leader's mouth before. The companies that I had worked for, especially the company previous to that, Blockbuster Video, it was the leaders were very confident, and you would never want to show opportunity, or if you're in these MBRs and you're talking about your business and there was any opportunity to improve, you were gonna hear about it, and you didn't want to shy away from those tough conversations at all. And so you were going to demonstrate confidence in your ability, and so that stuck with me. I was working for Potbelly at the time, and they said, you need to, in these meetings, you got the CEO asking you about your sales goal for the next fiscal year, and you put a big number on it. Well, I said he asked me for a big number, and so I was going to give him a big number. And she's like, how'd you feel about when you said that? I'm like, I took a big gulp. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to say this out loud, and I hope he doesn't hold me accountable to it, because it's going to be hard to hit. But I wanted to demonstrate resolve, and this, I wanted to demonstrate that I could put a big number on the board, because he asked me if I could do it, right?
Yeah.
And she came back around and said, you don't have to sign up for that. You need to learn how to demonstrate some more vulnerability. You're not perfect, and nobody is. And I kind of walked away from that like, but she wanted me to tell him less. Like, there's no way I would get out of that meeting with, but the lesson stuck with me about my own vulnerability and my own ability to do whatever I was asked to do. And we have to be realistic for our team too, right? Because when a team has an unrealistic goal, it could be a big audacious goal, but it has to have some realism built into it. Stretch goals are important to stretch into, but if they're impossible to hit, you're just gonna set it aside. Like, hey, well, I might get 75% of the way there, or 90% of the way there. But taking away that lesson of vulnerability, I think, has really stuck with me over time, and I would consider myself a vulnerable leader. Like, I share with my team my vulnerabilities, and I think it's very endearing, right? And they share their vulnerabilities with me, and it's endearing for them, right? I care very much about their well-being, and I will do whatever it takes to help them be successful. And when they don't feel successful, or they need to be vulnerable in a situation, I want us to embrace that vulnerability. Brene Brown talks about vulnerability all the time. I just wish I had learned that earlier in my career, because I was pretty successful in retail early on. I was running a region by the time I was 34 years old, and 150 stores, and could do no wrong. There's a lot I've done wrong. I've learned so many lessons over time. And I think that lesson around vulnerability has really stuck with me. And I coach my team to be vulnerable too. And then when there's, that vulnerability there's an openness that comes with it, and they can share where they're vulnerable and where they need help. And I can help them. If you don't share those vulnerabilities, or don't share where you need help because you think you can do it on your own, you're just working harder.
Right.
Right. So I think it comes from being in this career for a while, and all the experience adds up into wisdom. And so now, looking back on my career, I wish I had learned it earlier. That's
Yeah.
the lesson.
Yeah. Well, I think it takes experience to learn that lesson and
Yes,
run into situations where you're like, oh yeah, I wish my team knew I was a person too.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And it
that's where
teaches them that they can do it too. They can be vulnerable with you.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
It helps with I would say building self-esteem, building confidence is a primary role of a leader. Right? So you got to build their competence, but building their self-esteem and confidence will allow them to try new things. It'll allow them to learn from mistakes, continue to persevere, and so that requires some vulnerability too. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So to wrap up here, is there a question that you wanted me to ask you, or is there something that you want everybody to know?
You haven't asked me about my leadership style yet.
Oh, that's you might be the first one that has a name for their leadership style if you actually have a term for it.
Yeah.
So what is your leadership style, Chris?
Yeah. I would describe myself as a servant leader,
Mhm.
and it didn't come naturally to me in the beginning. I would say that when I first learned about servant leadership when I was in college, I
Mhm.
read a book called Leadership Jazz by Max Dupree, and the the book is um, set in the context of a jazz band and how a jazz band could be four individuals playing instruments, and then that ensemble comes together to make great music. And he puts in, like talks about servant leadership. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I want to be a servant leader when I grow up, and I'm going to do it in retail. And then you start your career, and then you start following leadership role models. And I've had different types of leadership role models with different styles of leadership. And there have been times where I've worked for micromanagers, and I became a micromanager.
Mhm.
Um, and I started getting results through micromanagement, and so that just like flamed that fire.
Yeah.
Um, and I even called it. I changed the name because I knew micromanagement was a bad term. I was
Yeah.
smart enough to realize like I shouldn't be calling it this, but this is what I'm doing, and I call it intense focus and follow up. And my leader laughs at
Yeah.
time. But I was micromanaging to get success, and I also learned that that's not sustainable. And it's also harder at the next level. So when I was a regional director and I tried to be a micromanager, and my DM said, "No, we don't want you to lead this way." I learned some painful lessons during that time, and I like started thinking about servant leadership again in that book that inspired me when I was in college. Um, and I changed the way that I lead people, and I really started putting the needs of the team before my own. I think I was climbing a ladder. A lot of us in retail climb a ladder because you see that hierarchy and like how fast can I climb up that ladder. And I was feeling pretty good about myself. And then I got the regional director job, and I was unconsciously incompetent at the job, and I was doing the job like a DM, and leading my team like they were store managers, and they did not like that. And so I had a courageous DM talk to me about it, and he's like, you're very good at your job. I'm sure you're very good as a district manager, but you are wearing us out, and I don't want to do this job anymore. I'm like, this is my best DM, and I'm running them off. Um, we talked for like 2 hours that night on the phone, and he ultimately stayed with the company, and we're good friends today. But I learned from that example and from a few others, like I need to start thinking about the team and putting their needs before my own, and that's what I wanted to be anyway. And so I started really focusing and studying servant leadership. And when I finally got to, I experienced servant leadership at Potbelly because it had a really strong company culture also. And we were very focused at that time on leadership development. And when I came to Starbucks, I realized that these are my people and this is the way I want to lead. And everybody else leads this way too. And so when I described early on that when I was talking about my career, like I found my dream job, not just because Starbucks is this amazing brand with so much built-in customer loyalty, but they lead the right way, and that's performance-driven through the lens of humanity. And I get to be a servant leader at Starbucks every single day, and I want to teach servant leadership. If anybody's interested, there's a former Starbucks partner. He was the president of our company for many years. His name is Howard Behar. If you follow him on LinkedIn or any other social media platform, he talks all about servant leadership. He's a good follow. He's a good human being and somebody that we all aspire to be like.
Yeah, I've turned around on servant leadership, the name and a lot of the like books and stuff that were published like 10, 15 years ago about it just kind of put me off.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody said something on LinkedIn, which I'm on a lot lately, a couple of weeks ago. And it was basically like servant leadership is removing the obstacles that your team has to face. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what I always try to do. And then I'm like, oh man.
Right. Yeah,
Is that the kind of leadership I should be doing? And it was like, how did the name just throw me off so much that, it's like I didn't look deep enough into what it actually meant.
Right.
But like when you do that and you like find those people who are truly good humans and they're doing it for the right reasons, then you see like their examples and you're like, oh yeah, this is how I should be leading my team.
Servant leaders serve others, not themselves. And that's the context I put myself in when I say those words, servant leadership. My job and my responsibility in the way that I want to lead is serving others and meeting their needs. Like questions like, how can I support you today? Or what do you need to be successful? What are the obstacles that are in your way that I can remove? In my job today, one of the most important roles and responsibilities I have is to understand the obstacles that are in the way of our success. And so I ask that question all the time. So I might have an ops coach that is working on a project, but they can't get alignment, or they're having a hard time with the next level leader, and they need me to help influence a different outcome. Well, that's when I do my best work. I get briefed on what the problem is, what our point of view is as a team, and what do I have to influence it, because I don't have positional authority in this situation. So do I have to influence a different outcome? And so I want to remove that obstacle. That is me serving the needs of my team. And I also think that servant leaders are very focused on professional development, because they are putting the needs of the people on their team first. And so those people want to grow. And so I have to prioritize helping them grow in their job.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I appreciate the time and all the things I've learned. It's every time I talk to you, I feel like I learned something new. So this is just even more of that, and we get to share it with other people.
Thanks,
so
Chad.
I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you inviting me on your podcast. I've listened to the previous podcasts, and you are an excellent coach too. I'm learning a lot from you and every one of these. I'm learning from your guests. And I appreciate you creating this forum to talk about leadership, and wishing nothing but the best on future episodes.
All right. Thank you so much for being here.